Starbucks will shut its Canadian stores for an afternoon next month for training to deal with what they call unconscious racial bias. The company is following the lead of its U.S. parent company. 8,000 Starbucks stores in the U.S. are closing later this month for inclusiveness training for its employees. That's after publicly apologizing for the arrest of two black men who were refused permission to use the washroom at a Philadelphia Starbucks store. In Canada, the training will take place on the afternoon of June 11th. The course is described as being about creating a culture of warmth and belonging. Fake news and its reach has come into the spotlight recently, and many organizations are trying to fix it. In fact, Google is now joining the pack. Last month, the company launched a $300 million campaign called Google News Initiative across the U.S., and right now, Google is in talks with Canadian publishers to integrate them into this new platform. Bob Cox is the chair of the News Media Canada and was at one of those meetings. He joins us now to talk about exactly what this is and exactly what it means for the news business. Welcome back. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Before we even get into what you make of Google's announcement, what is it? What are they actually proposing?
Well, really, the Google News Initiative wraps together everything Google does that supports the gathering news. The various tools they have, various data analytics, things like Google Subscribe, which allows you to use your Google membership to subscribe to different paid news sites and this sort of thing. So it's a whole bunch of things they bundled together to sort of show that they support the gathering of local news, essentially.
And
yeah.
Does it do that?
Well, it certainly does a very good job of bundling together all the things that Google provides.
Right.
Google is known more for making money off the news that other people gather, more so than doing any news gathering themselves. They don't gather news, they aggregate news, and so they make a lot of money off aggregating news. So they need to be seen to be doing something about what is really a crisis in news these days. We've got, as you mentioned, all the fake news, which is everywhere. We have traditional publishers, traditional broadcast outlets that can't afford to employ the same number of journalists, closing down in some cases. So Google, which is still making a lot of money and was a tremendously successful advertising platform, needs to be seen to be doing something about this problem.
And I mean, I don't want to blame Google for trying to advance its own interests. That's Google's kind of responsibility to its shareholders. But at the same time, you've been on the show before talking about that crisis in news is a crisis of news gathering. And this, it doesn't sound like it's doing anything to help address that.
No. Actually, it's really just using Google tools effectively. And a seminar here in Toronto this week was about this, was about how local publishers could plug into the Google better. There was no mention of actually paying us to produce any content that gets aggregated on Google. So that's the real problem. You know, it's nice that Google will help you sell a subscription. I might note that Google will also take a commission for selling that subscription.
Right.
So they'll make money doing that. And it's nice that they'll they'll do a search and your stories will appear on their search, and they'll send people to your site, but they make money on that too. So, so Google has figured out a lot of very good ways of making money off news without actually, again, employing any journalists or producing any news.
I mean, you've been in this business for a long time. You've run the Winnipeg Free Press. Do you feel, as a publisher, that Google is making money off the backs of small publishers like yourselves by giving access to your content without ever, and making tons of money off it without ever passing any of that money along? Well,
I mean, publishers do share in the revenue. So if a Google ad runs on your site, you get some of that revenue from Google. But it's not a lot of money. Most publishers don't make a significant amount of money from Google. It doesn't fund our newsrooms. And that's the real problem. I mean, Google talks about successful business models, and they have a very successful business model.
They have a great one.
A great business model. But if you're going to keep filling the pipeline with news that can be trusted, that counters the fake news that's out there, you have to have news producers. You have to have news outlets that have viable business models.
What was the tone and tenor in the room? Because I'm imagining a bunch of frustrated publishers on one hand and, you know, a very happy to be there Google on the other. What was the tone like?
Well, on the part of publishers, there was some hostility. I have to say that. And on the part of Google, they're incredibly professional, incredibly polished, very smart people, and they say all the right things. They say that they support local news. They say that they believe it's a fundamental pillar of democracy. They say all of these things. They say they want successful business models, but that last link, that link to actually generating content is never there.
that search for a functioning business model going forward in the publishing world is still sort of at, you know, 6s and 7s. We've seen Twitter and Bloomberg tie up together. And with each one of those, and I don't know what you have to say about that one in particular, but with each one of those, are we getting closer to somebody cracking the nut and figuring out how to make money in this world?
Well, you can make some money. The question is, what can you support with that money? Like, you can put up a digital site and you can run ads and you can make some money, but you can't support the kind of news gathering that people have come to expect, the kind of robust news gathering that's a defense against, you know, some of the craziness, for example, that we see in the United States. The New York Times, tremendously successful. They have more than a million paid digital subscribers, and yet that still won't fund their newsroom, right? So the thing is, the scale is tremendous. For small publishers like us, like most people in Canada, you just can't play in that game. You can't get enough money from digital to support your newsroom.
So Bloomberg will try with, what is there, $40, $35?
Well, they've gone,
subscription fee?
Bloomberg has gone, I think it's $39 a month now that you have to pay. They put up a paywall, which they haven't had in the past. But why have they done that? Because their old business model wasn't working. They weren't making enough money, or they weren't, or I don't know their finances, but clearly they felt they had to find a new revenue source, so they had to do it through subscription revenues.
Does the path forward, whatever the path may be, and for Google to be able to have access to this content, for publishers to be able to continue to make it, are those two worlds going to have to eventually come together and find common ground to work together?
Well, I think so, because they always used to be together. I mean, newspapers were tremendously successful advertising platforms that spent a lot of that advertising revenue on journalism.
Right.
Google is a tremendously successful advertising platform that doesn't spend the money on journalism. So you have to ask, and I think Google is afraid. Google is afraid that they may be required, or they may be taxed, or they may be regulated in a way that requires them, much like the TV industry is, right? The TV industry does news because they are regulated and they're required to do it, so yeah.
All right, we're going to leave it there, but thanks for checking in with us. It's certainly good to hear all the news from the publishing industry. Bob Cox, Chair of News Media Canada, and of course the publisher of the Winnipeg Free Press.
Thank you.